My boyfriend's older brother was returning to the country, so I went with him to pick him up at the airport. On the way to the airport, I felt a bit anxious. Is your brother easy to get along with? Will he like me? Ethan Shin smiled, pinched my cheek, leaned in, and kissed the corner of my mouth. My girlfriend is everyone's sweetheart. How could he not like you? His reassurance only made me feel more nervous. Ethan Shin's older brother, Lucas Shin, was no ordinary person. On the first day of our relationship, Ethan Shin had already mentioned how impressive his brother was. Online, his achievements were widely circulated. Even my 6-year-old cousin who studies piano could recite them all by heart. At 10, he won every major national piano competition. At 13, he held his first solo piano recital. At 16, he was admitted to a world-renowned university on a special scholarship and advanced through the ranks without any obstacles. At 26, he became a music professor at a renowned university abroad. His life seemed like it was on a different level. The media also praised him highly, calling him a musical genius. The first time I saw his photo, I was amazed by how much the brothers resembled each other. However, unlike Ethan Shin's handsome and sunny appearance, Lucas Shin had a more poised and elegant look. Ethan Shin even joked with me, saying he was worried I wouldn't like him once I met his brother. At the time, I was completely focused on the design proposal I had to submit next week, so I didn't hear what he was saying and naturally didn't respond. Ethan Shin, who has a good temper, immediately frowned, turned my chin toward him, and forced me to look at him. Mia, why aren't you saying anything? Did I guess correctly? I snapped back to reality and, following the unwritten rule of not arguing with a boyfriend, tried to reassure him, of course not. I was just thinking that your brother is so outstanding, I'm worried he might not even notice me. Ethan Shin finally calmed down and smiled his usual bright smile. I'm glad you don't think that. My girlfriend is so beautiful, who wouldn't like her? I smiled, hoping that was true. The entire ride was filled with anxiety as I rehearsed countless greetings in my mind. At 9 o'clock in the evening, the plane landed on time. After picking up our ride, we drove to the pre-booked restaurant. Lucas Shin was driving. Mia, what's wrong? What are you thinking about? His handsome face suddenly appeared in front of me, and I snapped back to reality. Nothing, nothing. The gaze from the driver's seat glanced over and then withdrew. I pretended not to notice, fidgeting with my fingers, unable to sit still. Are you hungry? Maybe we should eat something first. Ethan Shin didn't notice my unusual behavior. He pulled out a box of liqueur truffles from the pile of gift bags Lucas Shin had brought back and handed it to me. I took it blankly, my mind in a whirl, my eyes involuntarily glancing toward the man in the driver's seat. This was so strange. The moment I saw Lucas Shin at the airport, an unfamiliar yet familiar feeling washed over me, and my heart began to race. Despite the bustling crowd at the large airport, I felt an overwhelming sense of being trapped, as if an invisible dark net had enveloped me. I forgot everything I had planned to say, and everyone there could see how nervous I was. Lucas Shin spoke first. Miss Jean, it's nice to meet you. I gasped, lifting my head in surprise, and our eyes met. His black eyes were devoid of emotion, but I saw a hint of desire in the depths of his gaze. I couldn't help but recall last night's passionate moment when Ethan Shin suddenly suggested we play cosplay, also calling me Miss Jean. The voice was identical, even closer to Ethan Shin's from last night. I was startled by my own thoughts and forced myself to push them aside. It couldn't be true, it must be a mistake. Mia, what are you thinking about? My brother is shaking your hand, Ethan Shin laughed, gently pushing me forward. Before me were a pair of large hands with clearly defined veins and joints. Because we were so close, I could smell the faint scent of sandalwood cologne. Was it a coincidence? Ethan Shin had also been using this scent recently. For some reason, my throat felt dry. The moment our palms touched, I froze again. Lucas Shin's index finger tip also had a thin layer of calluses. The shiver from last night when his large hand touched my skin came back, and I unconsciously pulled away his hand. By the time I came to my senses, Lucas Shen had already pushed his luggage and walked out of the airport. Ethan Shen and I followed behind. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. I don't know why," I stammered in confusion. Our first meeting had gone so badly, his brother must think I'm a complete disaster. Thinking about it, I couldn't help but feel dejected. As he spoke, Ethan Shen reached out and placed his hand on my shoulder, furrowing his brow ever so slightly. "My brother is a piano virtuoso. Did he hurt you just now?" He said it seriously, but I shamefully misinterpreted his words and blushed, shaking my head to brush it off. When we got out of the car, I realized I had unconsciously finished an entire box of liqueur truffles. My alcohol tolerance isn't bad, but my mind felt a bit sluggish. Little glutton, eating so much chocolate, Ethan Shen helped me out of the car and playfully tickled my nose. Making intimate gestures in front of someone I wasn't close to made me feel awkward, so I tried to avoid him. Ethan Shen pulled me closer as if to punish me and kissed me directly. "What are you shy about? My brother isn't a stranger." My face turned bright red, and I buried my head in his chest, refusing to look up. Lucas Shen, standing nearby, looked at us with a cold, intimidating gaze. When we entered the restaurant, the waiter led us to the private room. As soon as we entered, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen, and I felt a warm flow between my legs. I knew something was wrong, my period had started. I had a pad in my bag, but my bag was in the car. With no other option, I asked Ethan Shen to go get it for me. For a moment, the spacious private room was left with only Lucas Shen and me. The air was eerily quiet. This themed restaurant was decorated with a starry sky motif, and the indoor lighting resembled scattered starlight. Under the dim, ambiguous lighting, the man across from me seemed to be glancing at me intermittently. The familiar sense of pressure returned, and I felt uneasy, so I forced myself to speak up to break the awkward silence. "Mr. Shen, aren't you teaching abroad? Why did you suddenly return to the country?" I knew the answer, but I asked anyway. Ethan Shen had mentioned to me that Lucas Shen had already achieved financial freedom and had quit his job to return to China to relax and enjoy life. I had just casually brought up a normal topic, but Lucas Shen didn't play by the rules. He replied casually, "What? Miss Jean doesn't welcome me?" I was drinking water and nearly choked on it. Do geniuses really think this way? I don't even know him, what's there to welcome or not welcome? I shook my head vigorously, denying it vehemently. "No, no. Ethan Shen is thrilled you're back." That was true. When Ethan Shen told me his brother was returning, he dragged me out for a late-night snack and we drank a lot. Lucas Shen chuckled. "And what about Miss Jean? Are you unhappy?" I was speechless again. How was I supposed to respond? What does his return have to do with me? Why should I be happy? The atmosphere grew awkward again. Just as I was at a loss for words, my savior, Ethan Shen, returned in the nick of time. I snatched my bag and bolted toward the restroom, escaping the strange conversation for a moment. After lingering outside for a while, I finally returned to the table. Fortunately, Ethan Shen was a chatterbox, and with him around, the atmosphere improved significantly, and I breathed a sigh of relief. However, during the meal, the man across from me kept glancing at me, making me feel extremely uncomfortable. His gaze was too aggressive, like a predator lurking in the depths of the jungle, ready to pounce, giving me the illusion that I had nowhere to escape, and I even broke out in a cold sweat on my back. I could only drink juice to distract myself, finishing 2 bottles in one go before stopping. Before long, the effects of the liqueur truffles kicked in again. My thoughts grew hazy, and the 2 similar figures in the private room made it hard for me to tell them apart. I shook my head, reached out to tug at Ethan Shen's sleeve, and whispered to him, "When are we going home? Want to go back?" A man's soft laugh echoed in my ear, his warm breath brushing against my cheek, and the faint scent of sandalwood cologne drifted into my nostrils. I felt something was off, my mind going blank for a few seconds. When I looked up, I met Lucas Shin's smiling eyes and quickly pulled my hand back in shock. I had grabbed the wrong person. When had he sat down on my left? I tried to recall what had happened, but couldn't remember a thing. Ethan Shin on my right seemed unaware of the situation and was still gesturing to the waiter to get me a drink. Celebrating my brother's return. Come on, cheers. The glass was refilled. Since I was on my period and couldn't drink alcohol, I substituted juice for wine. Strangely, the more I drank, the more dizzy I felt. My pupils dilated, and the two figures before me began to blur and overlap. In the second before losing consciousness, I seemed to smell the faint scent of sandalwood cologne. I was awakened by the cold. My clothes had been changed at some point, replaced by a white shirt with the scent of sandalwood cologne. I raised my hand, and the piano keys made a chaotic sound, which was particularly creepy in the silent night. I was a little scared, but then forced myself to calm down. My eyes were covered with a silk blindfold, making my ears unusually sensitive. The sound of warm air from the air conditioner drifted in from a corner of the room. I strained my eyes, using the faint moonlight from the window to vaguely discern where I was. If I wasn't mistaken, this should be Lucas Shin's lakeside estate. Ethan Shin had mentioned it to me before. It was an old house left behind by his parents after they passed away, registered under his older brother's name. Since he went abroad for further studies, it had been vacant, with only a housekeeper coming by occasionally to clean. During the summer break of my sophomore year, Ethan Shin had brought me here to stay for a while. If that was the case, the place with a piano must be the music studio. Perhaps Ethan Shin was flirting with me. So I cautiously called out, Ethan Shin. There was no response. I called again, Ethan Shin, stop playing around. Let me go. Still no response. A chilly breeze blew in through the half-open window. Despite the air conditioning, I shivered uncontrollably, and the pain in my abdomen grew worse. I tried to struggle, but it only increased the friction between my wrists and the metal cuffs, causing me to wince in pain. The piano keys moved in rhythm, producing irregular sounds of ding-dong. Listening closely, I could also hear the sound of footsteps. I held my breath as the silhouette of a tall figure became clearer through the silk blindfold. Until a pair of cool hands touched my cheek. Ethan Shin? I tentatively spoke, my voice trembling. The man chuckled, tightening his grip. Miss Jean, you like my brother so much? My heart sank. How could it be Lucas Shin? What do you want? Where is Ethan Shin? Why did you tie me up here? Out of instinct, I dodged his hands and struggled to move backward. What do you want? He repeated my first question with a light laugh. Moonlight poured over him, and through the silk blindfold, I saw him lick his crimson lips, curling them into a smile. He looked exactly like a vampire from the Western world. Of course, I want to have sex with you. I stared at him in disbelief, my face filled with shock. Lucas Shin, a man of such refined manners, could say such absurd words. He was my boyfriend's older brother. I tried to find a trace of a joke on his face, but there was nothing. Not only that, but his hands slowly moved downward, and I had nowhere to hide. His slightly rough fingertips brushed against my sensitive skin, and I trembled uncontrollably. I'm your brother's girlfriend. Don't you care if I tell him? I struggled to breathe, forcing my voice to sound calm. Miss Jean is still too naive. His gaze was dark and unfathomable. What do you mean? I stepped back warily, my back pressing against the cold piano. Do you think Ethan Shin doesn't know? He played with a few strands of hair that had fallen onto my chest, his eyes fixed on something behind me. How could that be? Don't try to lie, I blurted out instinctively. Mia. The familiar voice came from behind me, and my face turned pale instantly. Ethan Shin walked toward me under the moonlight, standing side by side with Lucas Shin. You too, why? Why are you doing this? This is illegal detention. The two psychos standing before me were my boyfriend and his older brother. And now, they had tied me up. Faced with the unknown fear, my voice trembled violently. Ethan Shin's Adam's apple moved slightly as he carefully lifted me off the piano keys. The metal cuffs scraped against the piano body, producing a crisp clinking sound. He held me like a child, his fuzzy head brushing against my face. Mia, you know I love you. I love you so much I want to lock you up. I didn't know what to say. How had I never noticed before that Ethan Shin was a madman? I was locked in a room on the second floor. Before leaving, Ethan Shin leaned in to kiss me, but I dodged him. A fleeting look of hurt flashed in his eyes. He smiled, ruffled my hair, and said goodnight as usual before leaving. The door was locked, leaving me alone in the room. I bit my lip, not expecting anyone to come save me. My parents were dead, and I didn't have any close colleagues or friends who would notice I was missing. I had to figure this out on my own. I looked around the room, searching for anything that could help me escape, but I accidentally discovered that this was the same room Ethan Shen and I had stayed in during that summer vacation. The room was mostly the same as before, except the TV had been removed, the windows had double security grills, and the door was locked from the inside. Before I could think of a way to escape, a sharp pain gripped my lower abdomen. I usually experience menstrual cramps every month, though the intensity varies. Usually, as long as I prepare in advance, it's not too bad. But today, I had been exposed to the cold wind, and my abdomen had gotten chilled, so the pain was particularly intense. I clenched my teeth, curled up on the bed, and broke out in a cold sweat from the pain. In the end, I didn't know if I had fallen asleep or fainted from the pain. When I woke up the next day, my whole body was burning hot. I tried to sit up, but a pair of strong hands pressed me back down. Mia, don't move. You have a fever. Ethan Shin caught the ice-cold towel that had slipped off my forehead, flipped it over, and placed it back on my forehead. I endured the discomfort and pushed him away in disgust. Get out. Don't touch me. Ethan Shin looked helpless, lowering his eyes to apologize. Mia, I'm sorry. It's all my fault for not noticing sooner. I made you suffer so much you got a fever. You can hit me or scold me if you want. Unless you let me go. I made a demand. He stared at me in silence for a moment before finally speaking. Mia, I'll do anything except let you go. I was too weak to muster the strength to curse him or argue further. I turned my head away and refused to look at him. Ethan Shin left, and Lucas Shin arrived, holding a bowl of congee. He sat at the bedside, pretending to feed me. I flung my hand away, and with a crash, the porcelain bowl shattered into pieces, spilling the scalding hot congee with preserved eggs and lean meat all over Lucas Shin. His white shirt steamed, but he seemed to feel no pain, not even furrowing his brow. He was even crazier than I had imagined. Surprisingly, he didn't get angry. He simply went back to his room to change clothes, then returned with another bowl of congee. I knocked it over again, using my actions to express my protest and dissatisfaction. After repeating this 3 times, a ripple finally appeared in Lucas Shin's deep, still eyes. He grabbed the metal cuffs at the bedhead and tightened them, leaving my hands and feet completely immobilized. I was forced to drink the bowl of porridge before he finally released the chains, turned around, poured a cup of warm water, and shoved the medicine and cup into my hands. Seeing I didn't move, he curved his lips, his rough fingertips grazing my chin. So disobedient? Do you want me to feed you? I didn't register how psychotic that statement was. I only knew I couldn't lose the upper hand, so I poured the water on him again without hesitation. This time, Lucas Shin's patience was exhausted, and his expression darkened completely. He lowered his eyelids and sneered, "Since you won't listen, I'll have to feed you myself." I wasn't about to back down either, glaring defiantly, determined to see what he could do to me. The next moment, Lucas Shin tossed the medicine into his mouth, took a big gulp of water, and leaned down to press himself against me. It happened so quickly I didn't have time to react. Moreover, I was restrained by the chains and had nowhere to escape. He gripped my waist tightly, easily prying open my tongue, and forced the warm water and medicine into my mouth. I had no choice but to swallow it. His purpose had been achieved, but he still didn't let go. No matter how hard I struggled and hit him, he only tightened his grip. Feverish and already weak, I struggled until I could no longer resist. Just as the oxygen in my lungs was about to be completely drained, he finally released me. Our noses touched, and the intimate atmosphere in the room reached its peak. From the lack of oxygen, my cheeks were flushed as I gasped for breath. Lucas Shin's Adam's apple moved slightly, and he curved his lips in a hint of satisfaction, his voice hoarse. "Try disobeying me next time." I frantically wiped my mouth, stunned by his audacity. I called him a beast in human form, worse than an animal, but he didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled, enjoying my rant before leaving. I leaned against the headboard in defeat, once again underestimating the extent of his psychopathy. As I revisited the details of yesterday's events, something felt increasingly off. I had eaten plenty of liqueur truffles before, and the after-effects shouldn't have been that strong. Unless... In a flash of realization, I remembered the bottles of juice. Everyone had eaten the food, so the issue must have been with the drinks. Before drinking, I just felt a bit dizzy, but after drinking, I felt very disoriented. Something was clearly wrong. Thinking about it now, there was nothing I didn't understand. Perhaps from the beginning, Ethan Shin had intentionally given me liqueur truffles, and the juice on the table was also tampered with. The two of them had teamed up to trick me. I sighed and leaned back against the headboard. There wasn't a single normal person in the entire room. After taking some fever-reducing medicine, my temperature dropped within a few hours. At noon, Ethan Shin brought me lunch. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, but his expression seemed a bit off. Before I could look again, the shadow on his face had already vanished. He placed the tray on the table, walked to the bedside, and called out to me, "Mia, I made all of this because you love it." I buried my face in the blankets and didn't make a sound, intending to go on a hunger strike. No matter what he said, I refused to come out. Finally, he sighed helplessly. "What will it take for you to eat?" "Unless you let me go," I mumbled, my ears twitching. "Mia, you know that's impossible," he sighed, about to say something else, but was interrupted by the ringing of his phone. While he was answering the call, I peeked out to see where the aroma was coming from. It was my favorite sweet and sour pork and spicy chicken stir-fry. My stomach growled at the wrong time, and I swallowed hard, then decided to stick to my protest. After 3 days of this, I had not only starved myself to the point of feeling like my soul had left my body, but my stomach was also starting to ache. The two of them still had no intention of letting me go. On the fourth morning, when Lucas Shin appeared in front of me with a plate of fried noodles, I couldn't hold back anymore. The aroma filled the entire room, making me swallow repeatedly. "Still not hungry?" Lucas Shin deliberately moved the plate closer. The rich fragrance strayed into my nostrils. I couldn't hold back anymore. I grabbed the chopsticks and started eating voraciously. He curved his lips into a smile, reached out to rub my back, and poured a cup of warm water for me. "Slow down, don't choke." I drank it all in one gulp and continued eating voraciously. Lucas Shin watched me eat intently, his aura radiating joy. "That's better. If you'd just listened earlier." I devoured 3 bowls of fried noodles and 2 large chicken drumsticks in one go, successfully stuffing myself to bursting. During the meal, he seemed to casually ask if my period still hurt. I was too busy eating to hear him clearly and just nodded randomly. Before going to bed that night, I realized how stupid I had sounded. Ethan Shin and Lucas Shin must have lost their minds, saying they each wanted to spend the night with me, claiming they were worried I might be in pain from menstrual cramps. I strongly suspected they had made up the reason on the spot, but I had no room to refuse. The first night was with Lucas Shin. After the lights were turned off, I lay stiffly on the bed, as far away from him as possible. Time passed slowly, and my eyelids grew heavier. In the middle of the night, it felt like a pair of large hands pulled me into his embrace. The warm palms rested on my abdomen, and the faint scent of sandalwood cologne was pleasant. When I woke up the next morning, I realized there was a large hand on my waist. I tried to break free, but it tightened around me. Lukashin hadn't woken up yet. He didn't even bother to open his eyes. His large hand was still around my waist. Dare to move again? I felt the changes beneath his body, and this time I dared not move, not even breathe. Your period hasn't ended yet? He opened his eyes and looked at me, his gaze filled with emotion, his hoarse voice struggling to contain the heat surging within him. My heart sank. What does this psycho want to do? Could he be waiting for my period to end before? I hurriedly closed my eyes and pretended to sleep, silently calculating the time in my mind. Today was the 5th day of my period. Based on past experience, it should end in about 3 days. Who knows what these two psychos will try to do then? I can't just sit here and wait for it to happen. I have to find a way to escape before my period ends. After spending a few days with them, I figured out a few things. I have experience dealing with Ethan Shen. He's easy to talk to and won't force me to do anything, but he's sick at heart. I underestimated him before. Lucas Shen is a bit different. He's the type who only responds to kindness and needs everything to go his way to get what he wants. He's the aggressive type among psychos. Resisting is pointless, so I've stopped trying. Instead, I'm pretending to be obedient and compliant. I eat my meals quietly, let them hold me while I sleep, and occasionally stroke their hair to lower their guard. Finally, on the 7th day at noon, the opportunity presented itself. Lukashin wasn't there that day. Given my good behavior over the past few days, when I mentioned last night that I wanted cake from a certain shop in the city center, he agreed without hesitation and went to buy it early in the morning. I calculated the driving time from the city center to Lakeside Estate, plus the weekend traffic, so the earliest he'd be back was around 1 p.m. Usually, lunchtime is 11:30 a.m., meaning I had 1.5 hours to act. At 8 a.m., Ethan Shen brought me breakfast, and I deliberately delayed him from leaving. Mia, why are you being so clingy today? He looked surprised by my initiative, as I had been quite resistant toward him before. I acted like someone in the early stages of a romance, wrapping my arms around his waist and resting my head affectionately against his chest. Nothing, I've just been thinking about the things that happened when we were dating. He didn't say anything, just stared at me with intense eyes, his gaze lingering. I pretended not to notice and continued reminiscing. Do you remember our first Valentine's Day? Everyone else went to romantic places for dates, but you took me to the aquarium. Thinking about it now, the aquarium was actually pretty fun. And there was Christmas when you knitted me a red scarf. It was a bit ugly, but it matched my outfit perfectly. Last year when I went back to my hometown for the new year, it was the first time we'd been apart for so long. I said I missed you, and the next day you were already waiting downstairs at my place. I recounted each memory one by one, quietly observing Ethan Shen's reaction. His dark eyes narrowed slightly, his pupils dilating as he seemed lost in his own memories. I talked non-stop for several hours, finally making it past 11:30 p.m. Finally, my stomach growled, and Ethan Shen realized he hadn't cooked. He pretended to get up and head to the kitchen. I hurriedly stopped him, tugging on his arm and pouting, "Let's not cook. Let's order takeout. I want Z's meatball burger, the one we used to eat all the time in college." Ethan Shen furrowed his brows, seeming to hesitate at my suggestion. Seeing that he was swaying, I immediately added, "The last time we had it was 2 months ago on our date. I really want it now." But, he hesitated. "But what? You don't think I'm going to run away, do you? I'm just a weak woman, how could I possibly outrun you, a big man?" I teased him playfully, my tone light and playful, like a couple teasing each other. Fortunately, Ethan Shen didn't think much of it and took my hand, smiling brightly. "Mia, if you really feel that way, I'd be really happy." Before I could speak, he seemed to think of something else, and his expression changed instantly. In an instant, my shoulder was gripped tightly, forcing me to meet his gaze. Mia, who do you like more, me or my brother? Ethan Shen's thin lips pressed tightly together, his deep, enigmatic eyes holding a hint of caution. I paused for a few seconds, adhering to the principle of speaking appropriately to different people, and answered decisively, you. He clearly took it as a compliment, his smile widening as he rested his fuzzy head on my neck. You have to keep your word. No backing out. I obediently hugged him back, lowering my eyelashes to hide the sharpness in my eyes. Ethan Shen, of course, ordered takeout. Since the villa was in a remote area, the delivery service didn't show up, so he called a delivery guy. Meanwhile, I deliberately rubbed my wrist until it bled and then pretended to accidentally expose it to him. To escape, I had to untie the chain tied to the bedhead. I was taking a gamble, betting on Ethan Shen's feelings for me. Fortunately, when he saw it, his eyes filled with concern. He carefully untied the metal cuffs, applied medicine, and even allowed me to walk around the house for a while. During the delivery gap, I silently reviewed the plan for the next steps. The room was on the second floor, and Ethan Shen took no more than 5 minutes to go downstairs to get the delivery and return. In those less than 5 minutes, I had to sneak out of the room, take the car keys from the entrance, and run to the car parked on the lawn to succeed. This was my only chance. Success or failure hinged on this moment. 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang as expected. As soon as Ethan Shen stepped out of the door, I couldn't help but press my ear against the door to listen. Once I was sure his footsteps had faded, I tiptoed out of the room. The large villa had 2 staircases. Ethan Shen took the left staircase, so I naturally went in the opposite direction. When I reached the corner of the staircase and waited quietly, my eyes scanned the entrance hall until they locked onto the black car keys hanging on the wall. I took a deep breath and stared motionlessly at Ethan Shen's every move at the door. He bent down to pick up the takeout on the ground, then turned and went upstairs. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps. I silently estimated the number of steps it would take him to enter the room. Now was the moment. I darted toward the door like an arrow leaving the bow, grabbed the car keys, pushed open the door, and ran toward the car. My mind was racing. If I hadn't miscalculated, Ethan Shen had entered the room, realized I wasn't there, and was already coming downstairs to chase after me. Sure enough, his voice echoed behind me. Mia, come back. At this point, listening would be madness. I clenched my teeth and ran with all my might, giving it everything I had. The shouts behind me grew louder. Just as he was about to catch me, I burst into an incredible sprint. With a loud slam, I opened the car door, quickly closed it, and locked it. The thick glass window separated me from Ethan Shen. He kept banging on the window, trying to get me out. I was gasping for breath, but my hands didn't stop moving for a second. I inserted the key into the lock and started the car. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, a hand reached out from the back seat and grabbed my neck before I could react. You're such a bad girl. The escape failed. The main reason was that I had underestimated Lucas Shen's level of psychopathy. Who would have thought he'd hide in the car just to catch me? I was caught again. This time, however, the location had changed. I was locked in a dark basement. Mia, you're so disobedient. How should I punish you? Lucas Shen's sharp, cold gaze was like a gentle knife, and his voice was as icy as poison, completely at odds with the faint scent of cream on his body. He tightly clamped my hands. My skin was raw from being rubbed, and I couldn't help but scream, "You 2 psychos, let me go." Lucas Shen didn't seem bothered. He raised his hand and touched my cheek. You were bad. This is the punishment for trying to escape. I was both angry and scared, so I turned my pleading gaze toward Ethan Shen. He just shook his head and said softly, Mia, you promised me you wouldn't run away. Lying children must face the consequences. I was so angry I wanted to curse, but for my safety, I held back. After the 2 left, the sound of a lock clicking shut came from the entrance to the secret room. I noticed that the round, thick metal hatch on the ceiling opened and closed without making a sound, likely padded with soundproofing material. Looking around, it was more accurate to describe the place as a one-bedroom apartment rather than a secret underground room. The room was fully furnished, with no sharp corners, curves, or sharp objects in sight. It seemed to have been meticulously prepared long ago, as if waiting for someone to move in. Now, the answer was obvious. Shifting my gaze, a large black cloth protruding from the southwest corner caught my attention. I dragged my heavy metal cuffs slowly toward it and tremblingly lifted the cloth. Beneath the cloth was an oddly shaped circular steel cage, with a concave convex structure, roughly the height of a person, capable of holding 3 adults at once. The cage's locks were hollow loops. Once secured, they could only be opened from the outside. I stood with my back to the bedhead, motionless, staring for a long time. In the dim light, half my face was shrouded in darkness, my expression unclear. Who was the cage for? I silently curled my lips. That was hard to say. On the 8th day, my period finally ended. Ethan Shen and Lucas Shen continued to take turns bringing me meals as usual. I didn't waste my effort and ate everything. They were more cautious than before, not bringing the keys into the secret room and leaving their phones outside. They closed the round metal hatch every time they entered or exited. But even the most cautious person can make a mistake. Night fell, and Ethan Shen and Lucas Shen both stayed behind. That meant one of them must have the key on them. I pretended to be calm, leaning against the headboard, my gaze silently sweeping over the two of them. Aren't you afraid? Lucas Shen chuckled softly, his burning gaze fixed on me, a smile playing on his lips. What good would fear do? I leaned against the headboard, staring straight at him. You've finally learned your lesson. Lucas Shen reached out, his rough fingertips brushing against my lips, leaving a startling warmth. Knowing what was about to happen, I didn't feel nervous at all. Instead, I was so excited that the blood beneath my skin was boiling. I watched them remove the chains and take out a men's tie from their pockets to tie around their necks. I didn't struggle, or perhaps I never intended to. My peripheral vision lingered on the steel cage in the southwest corner for a moment. Just as everything was about to begin, I suddenly spoke up. I have a more exciting game. Dare you try it? I deliberately spoke up at that moment to provoke him. The men's movements froze. Lucas Shen's forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat, and his voice was unusually hoarse. What? I pointed at the steel cage in the southwest corner. There, you can't let all your preparations go to waste, can you? Lucas Shen's pupils contracted slightly, his bloodshot eyes intertwined with desire and darkness, like a beast trapped inside. You're quite bold. He reached out to hug me, but Ethan Shen beat him to it. The former's eyes darkened, looking displeased. Ethan Shen held me tightly as he walked toward the steel cage step by step. My heart raced, and something inside me felt like it was about to burst out. The steel cage was designed with a higher interior and lower exterior, meaning that taller people would be on the inside, and shorter people on the outside. Lucas Shen, who was usually calm, couldn't resist any longer. His rough hands reached out to pull me into his embrace. But I refused, turning around and clinging to Ethan Shen, refusing to let go, tears welling up in my eyes. Brother, you scared her, Ethan Shen frowned, holding me close and dodging. The other man snorted coldly, don't you dare forget, I'm the one who brought her back. She's my girlfriend. So what? Finally, Lucas Shen lost his temper and reached out to grab her. I pretended to be scared and started crying. Ethan Shen naturally refused to give in, and the two of them started fighting in the cage, punching and kicking each other. I huddled in the corner, pretending to be scared, but secretly trying to move away. Until the crisp sound of the lock clicking shut, the two of them finally stopped. Ethan Shen was at a disadvantage and was hit so hard that his reactions were sluggish. Lucas Shen was the first to recover, though his face was bruised, his handsomeness undiminished. Jean Yao, I advise you not to waste your efforts. Even if you lock the cage, you can't escape without the key to the secret room. He stared at me calmly, waiting for me to give in. Mia, what you're doing is futile, Ethan Shin also spoke up. I ignored him, picked up one end of the chain on the ground, threaded it through the hollow lock, and tied the other end to the bed frame. After finishing, I pulled out the key in front of both of them, making sure to shake it. Who said I didn't have it? I crossed my arms and laughed coldly. Lucas Shin's expression turned icy. Where did you get the key? I wouldn't tell him, I'd gotten it 3 years ago. I didn't answer his question, instead straightening my clothes. Enjoy yourselves. After leaving the basement, I took the large lock on the round metal hatch and secured the exit tightly. I glanced around casually and spotted Lucas Shin's black phone on the desk. I turned it off, opened it, snapped out the SIM card, and tossed it into the fireplace, all in one fluid motion. The flames flickered and crackled. I went downstairs and found Ethan Shin's phone on the coffee table in the living room. The password was my birthday. I logged into his email, sent a resignation email to his boss, and then deactivated the number. I went to work as usual, and everything seemed to have returned to normal. Occasionally, colleagues would gossipingly ask me why I hadn't seen my boyfriend in so long. I smiled and said he was busy with work, and they didn't ask any further questions. During the day, I diligently played the role of an office worker, and at night, I went home to play with the kitten. I placed the food in front of the cage. I didn't care if the kitten ate it or not, it would eventually eat it anyway. Side story. During the summer of my sophomore year, Ethan Shin took me to stay at Lakeside Estate. As soon as I walked in, I felt a strong sense of being watched. I quietly found hidden cameras in every corner of the villa. It seemed like Ethan Shin thought I knew nothing, so I'd play along and act like I didn't know anything either. My blood began to boil, and I licked my lips while facing away from the camera. How interesting. What could be more exciting than my boyfriend being the same kind of person as me? If only his genius older brother were here too. The villa was huge, and the housekeeper came to clean once a week. Through the gaps in the books, I caught a glimpse of the circular metal hatch glowing eerily in the soft light, with a dusty lock and key lying on top. It felt like it was leading to a secret room below. So I pretended to help the housekeeper and successfully obtained the key template. I planned to find a locksmith to make a copy once I returned to school. I waited and waited, and the opportunity finally came. Ethan Shin said his brother was returning to the country. I pretended to be nervous, acting as if I didn't know Lucas Shin had already returned, and as if I didn't know that sometimes the person lying beside me at night was Lucas Shin. The juice laced with drugs at the dinner table was part of my plan. When I returned from the bathroom and passed by the stairwell, I overheard the servants' conversation. Since they were taking the initiative, I didn't need to bother. With my flawless acting, I successfully deceived both of them. In the end, I was locked in a room. The hidden cameras by the bed recorded every one of my movements. This wasn't going to stop me. I refused to give in, pretended to compromise, showed weakness, and looked for an opportunity to escape. I played out every scenario. That's why Lucas Shin was in the back seat of the car. He had already figured out my escape plan from my actions, so catching me was only natural. Besides, I never intended to run away in the first place. If you want the fish to bite, you have to put in some effort. I was locked in the basement as I had hoped. It wasn't bad inside, actually better than I had imagined. That steel cage was the weak point. I don't know how much Ethan Shin truly cares about me, but that doesn't matter anymore. In the end, I deliberately showed weakness, exploiting men's tendency to think with their lower halves, and successfully caused a conflict between the two of them. They won't know this was my carefully planned scheme, and they don't need to know. A kitten doesn't need to know these things.